High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. First and foremost, I want to give a massive shout out to the crew here at the Mile High Sports Network. They are the go-to guys for all things sports. Across the core four right now, you have no shortage of headlines with the Broncos picking up a massive win last night on Monday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns. You have both the Colorado Buffaloes and the Colorado State Rams going bowling. Winter sports are in full swing now. You have the Avalanche. You have the Nuggets. There is, again, no shortage of things coming from the Mile High Sports crew for all of that Core 4 related content. Make sure that you smash and subscribe wherever possible. Again, any help that you can provide for these fighters out here in the local community, guys, we love the support and we appreciate anything that you can give as we transition here into the calendar preview. We always stress the message, if you can, please buy the fighters from the tickets. If you don't have the opportunity to go out and check out the fights live in person or aren't able to purchase the stream, a like, a share, a mention on social media, so many of things go so far to help out these young fighters in the journey at this stage. This weekend, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this coming up, we have the 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series final show of the year that is going to be going down December 7th. Like I said, this Saturday, the Muay Thai matinee happening at the Stampede off Havana Street. We're cracking the doors at noon. First fights are going to be getting after to roughly around 1 o'clock. This is Colorado's only all Muay Thai exclusive promotion. This will be a tremendous opportunity for you to go out there and support some of the NAC Muay in our community before you have the chance to check out the full card this weekend for UFC 310. Again, that is going to be 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series happening at the Stampede this Saturday. Next weekend, you have Battle MMA Championships going down on the 14th at the Norris Penrose Event Center down in Colorado Springs. This is the final MMA event on the year for 2024. It's been a tremendous showing for the entire frame in this calendar year for combat sports. And we're going to be having our awards show coming up here in a couple of weeks. So if you have any ideas out there for who you believe should be recipients of some of our awards, some of those that we've given out in the past have been Colorado Fighter of the Year, Pro and Amateur, Fight of the Year, Submission of the Year, Knockout of the Year, Feel Good Story of the Year, Social Media Follow of the Year. Plenty of those categories. And if you think that there's something out there that's worthy of recognition, that was just a tremendous story over the course of the last trip around the sun, then please reach out. Let me know, and I want to give all the due recognition possible out there to the incredible athletes that consist in our combat sports community here in Colorado. You had, kicking off the 2025 slate, Sparta is ringing in the action. I believe that's going down on January 18th. They've been knocking it out of the park with cards lately, giving credit where credit is due. It's hats off and salute to the Sparta crew for, again, putting together great events with a lot of fighters having the opportunity to go out there and showcase the work that they've been putting in. So kudos to you and salute for kicking off the 2025 frame here in the next few weeks. We're going to transition now, though, folks, into the weekend recap. It was a bit of a light weekend overall, especially given that it was the holiday, no UFC, the time start for the PFL card. And there's just so much to dive into overall that aren't the results themselves for the PFL. And I kind of spoke to this a little bit last week, but this Night of Champions, I can't help but think that it was overshadowed so much by all of the controversy that was going on throughout the week from some of the Bellator fighters that were acquired in the merger and who were speaking about how they haven't been active, they haven't been booked for fights. And if this was your night of champions, and with them keeping both of those brands alive, it creates so much confusion for the common consumer out there, and even for the very much in the weeds and in the thick of it consumer. Why are you having a tournament for a 135-pound champion and supposedly the best in the world that you are giving honors to, but Patchy Mix is not in the fold for that? The format for PFL at this stage has, I think it's expired, and I think that was what the draw was that you had this $1 million carrot at the end of the stick for the season. However, by the way that the PFL has played this season and have done so poorly, Don Davis, I might add, they undercut themselves just a few weeks ago by putting so much emphasis and importance on that Battle of Giants card where Francis Ngannou returned. And this was your night of champions for those who have fought multiple times over the course of this year, and it just kind of got swept under the rug. You had the opportunity with multiple champions or former champions, if you will, getting into the fold for an additional title. That wasn't really a big story that was shared everywhere. That wasn't really being talked about. You have arguably the brightest prospect and now champion in all of women's MMA outside of the hardcores. Who knows who Dakota is? Let's run through the results here and we'll talk a little bit more rhetoric on this PFL situation here. In the main event, you had the featherweight title fight. It was Timur Kizriev taking on Brendan Loughnane. Now, Brendan was one of those who is a former champion, a guy who won on the Contender Series, did not get the contract. He falls short in this opportunity here to win another $1 million title. Timur moves up to 18-0. Again, though, it was a fight that went all the way the distance. There was only a couple of noteworthy finishes that produced big, I guess, wow moments. Dana White talks about how he's not in the business of selling fights. He's in the business of selling OS moments. Well, there was really kind of only one of those on this card, and we'll continue running through these results here. You had, in the co-main event, you had Dakota Ducheva, who took on the former UFC title challenger in Talia Santos. Talia Santos, she obviously met all of the expectations when the PFL signed her by getting to this point, by getting to the championship. There was a lot of the talk back and forth, and a lot of the rhetoric being said about Dakota in general was that, oh, she's this young, pretty girl. She's a Barbie. She's a model. She doesn't need to be in the cage fighting, all this. And then I love that Dakota has that just bit of wildness in her. She's got that English woman in her where she's not afraid to bounce right back your Molly McCann's, or she's kind of the Lady Patty, if you will. And she said, well, this model just beat your ass. So I'm with it. I'm with it right there. That moves Dakota Ducheva up to 14-0. She is, again, she's arguably the biggest prospect in all of women's MMA. She now has a world championship under a major organization's banner by her name. Where does this go from her? What does 2025 hold for her? Where will she be in the next couple of years? It's an interesting question as it relates to Dakota Ducheva, just again, simply because she has so much promise, but what is going to be the ultimate benefit or the gain for her aside from money staying with an organization like the PFL and the way that it's being currently ran? I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, money talks. Bringing home that $1 million paycheck, that feels very encouraging to want to return next year. And I will offer that the PFL has a very strong women's roster. I will also offer, though, on the counter that she did have some of the best or the more preferential matchups to get through the regular season into the postseason. She certainly had to get all the way to this point and had to go and win the fights. I'm not doubting that. I'm not shying away from that and discrediting her going out there and facing the opponents, getting the wins. She did all of that. And she proved that she was the best in the field with this tournament championship victory. But I do still believe that Dakota is going to continue to have to fight some of those big names. And there's just not really a ton of those in the PFL for her to rise to the true level of superstardom, fame, fortune, and all of that she could ultimately actualize with the talents that she possesses, because she is an exciting fighter. Her style is something that is very marketable. It just kind of circles back, and they're two different styles of fighters and very different points age-wise in their career, but it circles back kind of the way that Kayla Harrison was a few years back of, yes, I've won this $1 million prize a few times, but I'm still kind of looked at as the B League champion. Will that be something that happens for Dakota? I guess we'll see as time moves forward. In the light heavyweight finale, you had Impa Kasanganay trying to challenge for his second championship. He took on Dovlet Yagashimuradov. I'm totally butchering that, but Dovlet goes through and he wins within a minute. This was potentially one of those feel-good stories that we were hoping to see for a guy like Impa, who is a UFC cast-off, goes and wins the $1 million prize in the PFL last year, comes back through this year, makes it all the way to the finals again, but falls short. Either way, it's still a tremendous story for Impa. But this, once again, though, how many people know who Dovlet is? And I'm going to mention a couple more of these champions now who are champs. And I understand that they're from other parts of the world, but it's on the PFL as the promotion to market, to promote, and to create the awareness for these fighters. And I believe that they have just fumbled miserably in the process. You had Shamil Musayev taking on Magomed Umalatov for the welterweight championship. This was a third round KO TKO. A couple of guys who are incredibly talented. I mean, both had came in with to the fight with unbeaten records. That should be something that was the topic of discussion across all of MMA media, especially in a week with no UFC. You have a guy who is 20-0-1 taking on a guy who was 17-0, or excuse me, a guy who was 19-0-1 taking on a guy who was 17-0. This should be spoken of. Another fight where you had a former Bellator champion and one of the bigger names acquired. You had Brent Primus, who took on Gadzi Rabadov. Gadzi picks up the KO TKO. But again, Brent Primus is one of the few guys that you absorbed onto that roster that has any sort of name value, or you can go back and type in highlights and wins that he's had against big caliber guys. A former Bellator champion, mind you, who had that finish against Michael Chandler. Nobody knew that this was happening. You had the heavyweight finale between two Russians in Denis Goltsov and Oleg Popov. Finishes in a triangle choke. First round finish, a wild back and forth affair. A couple of shares on social media, and after that, it was kind of brushed to the side. To me, all of this, again, it's just such a horrible mismanagement for the promotion for the PFL. And I feel bad for the fighters. I feel bad for those who were absorbed from that Bellator merger, who haven't gotten opportunities to continue to put themselves out there into the fire and test their skills. All of those that we mentioned last week, the champions and former champions who they're just asking for opportunity. They're not asking for you to go out there and say, oh, will me this Brinks truck, which I'm sure everybody would love. They're just asking for the opportunity to fight. and they're not being given the opportunity to fight. And I think that all of that controversy puts a mar on this Tournament of Champions event for the PFL, because underneath your collective banner of the PFL Tour roster, you still have the guys out there like Patchy Mix, like Patricio Pitbull. All of them are still out there, and we were not able to see what they had to offer for this mix, and they missed out on a lot of money in this prime time of their career right now, which is very much a shame. After the break, folks, we're going to be talking this weekend's UFC 310 card. Hit us up on social media. That's me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery, or hit us up at Mile High Sports. Let us know what you think. Stick around after the break. This is the MMA Plug on Mile High Sports.
At Hooters, you can watch all the games with your buddies. All your buddies. Like the ones with ice-cold beer. And wings that'll knock your taste buds into next Tuesday. You know, buddies you won't have to fight for the remote. Buddies who know a thing or two about football. And the fans who live for it.
Where else are you gonna get all this?
Hooters, your official hangout for game day.
Welcome back to the MMA Plug, presented to you by Mile High Sports. Make sure that you smash that like and subscribe wherever possible. Right now, we're going to dive into this weekend's UFC 310 preview. This is the final pay-per-view card for the UFC, the last of two shows on the year for the sports flagship promotion. We have a flyweight title fight, and we have a few different ranked matchups, multiple former champions and challengers on this card. There is a lot to be offered for this, some controversy with a couple of matchups as well. So without further ado, we might as well just dive right into things here. In the main event, we have a title fight in the flyweight division between Alexandre Pantoja taking on UFC newcomer Kai Asakura. Kai Asakura, former champion of Ryzen. This guy is explosive. He is someone who is an extremely entertaining style of fighting, and his only losses in the last few years are to somebodies. You know, they're to guys like your Horiguchis or Manel Kops or people who are actual somebodies. And his electric style of finishing is something that you've gotten to kind of learn a little bit through this week's UFC Embedded series, where it started off where he got into fighting because his brother was a big street fighter back home and ran out of opponents. And basically the boys pulled him out there and said, "Hey, it's your turn. Let's go." And he was very elusive, evaded the majority of all of the attacks, had no training or anything from there, and then decided after that, well, I need to go pursue this if this was how this went with nothing. So here we are now, years later, a world champion of a regional organization, now foraying into the UFC. Very rare in this day and age do we see somebody as a debutant get a UFC title fight, but by virtue of the division and the way that it has played out over the course of the last couple of years, Alexandre Pantoja has cleared it out. There's just no other way to say it, and I mean that as no disrespect or way to slight any of those who he's fought, but he's beat everybody in the top ranks of the division, and some of whom he has multiple wins over. It's understandable that they bring in a guy like Kai Asakura to come in as some fresh blood with an exciting style to potentially usurp this title holder and injects a breath of fresh air for the future of the division with new title challengers. Because if Asakura loses, then what's next for Pantoja? It's a really good question out there. You saw that they were already kind of reaching into the bag when Ursay got the title fight. I mean, Ursay gets a big knockout finish against Mash Schnell, is sitting at 10, gets a title shot. That's because of who is won, who is available, all of that, where the last wins are. Yeah, it's tough to find a matchup for Pantoja with somebody who is qualified that he has not already fought. That's the best way to put it. And this is where Kai Asakura gets entered into the equation. I don't know that Kai has what it takes to be able to just outwill Pantoja. There's times where Pantoja is essentially a zombie that is able to will himself to victory. I believe that he will be the stronger fighter. I believe that he will be the better grappler. I think that when it comes to tight spaces, he will be the better striker in tight spaces, though the long range attacks and the knees from Kai Asakura are certainly something that Pantoja is going to have to look out for. And I believe that knees to the body could be very beneficial for Oscar in this matchup. What do you guys think? Let us know online. Hit us up at Mile High Sports or me, Jordan Kurtz, at comments from the Peanut Gallery. In the co-main event, this is a bit of a shakeup. We were originally supposed to have a welterweight title fight on this card. Obviously, Bilal Muhammad is out with that bone infection. So in steps a top or a title eliminator fight, if you will, between two guys who have trained at the same gym before, allegedly some history between them. You have number 3 ranked Shavkat Rakhmonov, 18-0, all finishes, taken on Ian Machado Gary, sitting there at 15-0. I don't know how Ian Gary gets this done, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I've said that in a couple of matchups in the past that I thought, I think that this might be a little bit too much for Ian, and he was able to prove me wrong in those fights. But I think that Shavkat is a completely different animal. This mountain man who has hunted and harvested his food by using eagles on horseback is a different breed. I think that Shavkat Rakhmonov is a guy who can get the job done on the feet, as well as if this gets anywhere in tight spaces and that action hits the canvas, it's a wrap. It's done. I don't know that we need to go too far into the weeds or too thick into the details here for this matchup, simply because I think that Shavkat is unfortunately being robbed of the opportunity to fight for the title. I think that he is the champion in the making. You have Ian Gary saying that, oh, he had the conversation with Henry Hooft where Hooft said that Shavkat told him that, oh, he knows that Ian will be a future champion, but just not right now is the time. Who knows of all of that? I think that guys like Ian Gary, Ilya, and some of the others throughout the roster or throughout the sport as a whole, they're going to have to find somebody else to mimic or to try to be the next coming of in terms of their antics now that there's so much controversy and the block is hot for Conor McGregor. In the feature fight, you have a matchup between two top-ranked heavyweights. You have number 2, Cyril Gane, taking on number 3 ranked Alexander Volkov. This is a fight where you have two very large humans who have tremendous kickboxing skills. Neither one of them are very solid on the ground. We've seen from the embeddeds and from some of the training footage that Gane has worked on some of his ground game, especially following his loss to John Jones. But how much of that will actually play into effect here? Good guess. I would rather lean on the side of things of saying that this is going to be a bit more of a point fighting heavyweight kickboxing matchup. If I'm wrong, I will be the first one to stand there and admit that someone goes out there and tries to run through someone, but stylistically, both of these guys like to fight at range. I think that that's where the action takes place. Also on the main card, you have a matchup between number 13 ranked featherweight Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. He is facing the return of Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie obviously carries such a legacy with his last name and being the son of arguably the greatest ever in Hickson. Kron has never really put a ton of emphasis on his UFC run or in his career that way. He's had a couple of big name fights. He had the early matchup where it kind of puts him on the forefront and blows him up in front of everyone. Then he has a couple of duds. There's a couple of matchups, the Jourdain, the Cup, that is just that style or just being a one-dimensional guy doesn't really it doesn't really work in 2024 anymore. But I think that the matchmakers did a great job for this fight in giving him somebody in Bryce Mitchell, who Bryce isn't anything to write home to mama about on the feet either. However, Bryce is somebody that he will bring the fight. And I think that grappling wise, he can tangle with Crone and he's not going to be afraid to get into the thick of things with Crone Gracie. That Arkansas strong, that backwoods redneck jiu-jitsu is not going to be afraid to go in there and get into some entanglements. Spent some time training with his cousin AJ Cunningham, and Bryce is always looking to try to be creative whenever he's on the ground. His systems from the bottom, he doesn't want to stay down. He's trying to look to get back up or to create a sub or a sweep from those positions. And when you have somebody who is as well versed and the just elite of the elite, the royalty of jiu-jitsu and grappling, and just such the high level decorated purist the way that Crone Gracie is, I'm interested to see how that specialist matchup plays out. Styles make fights. I think that this could be an opportunity for us to see an entertaining grappling exchange between these two. Another featherweight matchup, you have Nate the Train Landwehr taking on Doo Ho Choi. You have two guys who have never seen a boring fight. Nate the Train is a complete savage, a guy who is perennially in fight of the year and always a contender for a fight of the night. If you do not finish him, he will come back and he will have an extreme vengeance trying to finish you. Doo Ho Choi, on the flip side, has had one of the most underrated fights of all time in the UFC with Cub Boy back when. And this is a guy who we haven't seen as active as maybe some of his peers. And some of that is due to the mandatory service that they have over there for military. And then some of it is just in general activity with injuries, so on and so forth. But I think that this is a banger matchup to open up the main card, and one that you certainly want to make sure that you have that purchase or that stream link already in place for the pay-per-view once it starts on Saturday night. As we go down on the prelims, there are a few of these matchups between ranked fighters and former champions, and some that are all the way down on the early prelims that it's a bit of a head scratcher on the placement, but we'll run through these real quick just so you are all aware in the process. You have the main event of the prelims, a couple of former title challengers, both guys who fought John Jones at 205 pounds. You have Dominic Reyes taking on Anthony Lionheart Smith, number 12 against 13, respectively. There's been some heat between the two for years now, so they have the chance to finally get in there and get after it. That'll be a great one that you get to have for free there on ESPN. You have a welterweight matchup between number 14 ranked Vicente Luque taking on Temba Garimbo. This was originally slated for Vicente Luque to take on Nick Diaz. I love Nick Diaz. It's my all-time favorite fighter. It breaks my heart to see the condition that Nick is in right now and the demons that he is battling and dealing with. We'll talk a little bit more about Nick later on in the program. You have a featherweight matchup between former bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling at number 9, taking on top 5 ranked Masfar Avoyev. You have Randy Brown taking on Brian Pooh Bear, for those who have known him for a long time, or more recently known as the Butcher Battle, as Brian Battle taking on Randy Brown in a welterweight fight that you're getting that early on the card. That has all the makings of a potential fight in the night. You have Randy Brown, who goes out there and puts everything into his performances in every turn of the way. And you have Brian Battle, who he has just been on quite the tear since, especially dropping down to welterweight. You know, he had the viral moment out there in Paris earlier this year, the walkout song, the chains, the drip all the way across the board, the finish, the post-fight promo, the double birds. Right now, Brian Battle is seeing beach balls and he is hitting them out of the park. How does that momentum carry into Saturday night? That's why they fight the fight. On the early prelims, this is one that just is a bit disrespectful, but you have a rebooking of Chris Weidman taking on your boy, Eric Andrews, friend of the program. This fight was originally supposed to happen a month ago at Madison Square Garden. Day of the fight, Eric had food poisoning and was unable to compete, so they rebooked it, ran it back for a month later. Chris has been vocal about not getting his money. He's a flat rate guy, so he said it was already written into the budget. Well, the only thing that I can say or offer to that, Chris, is that there was precedent set when your brother-in-law Wonder Boy didn't fight a while back for another weight-related situation where the fight didn't happen and he didn't get paid. I know it's not the same exact scenario, but that should have been enough to know, like, fight's not happening, probably not getting paid here, which is unfortunate and which I do disagree with. But again, when we just look at the precedent of the operations from the promotion, that's what it is. Following that, you have a flyweight matchup between a ranked number 14, Cody Durden, taking on Joshua Van. Joshua Van is another one of those fighters who he is going out there for the finish. There's times where he might even give up a round early and will rally on to get that knockout blow later on in the fight. Cody Durden is a guy who he's a grinder style. Cody Durden has fought out here in Colorado. He's fought for Sparta before, but there's been many of instances throughout his career where Cody Durden's just been kind of a turd. The way that he's acted in the media, his way that he's handled himself, it's just, there's been times where it's not been ideal, let's just say. But when it comes to fighting, the kid does have the skills that prove that he is a worthy UFC roster guy. And this is going to be a matchup between two styles that conflict and that clash, a more wrestle heavy grinder style against a kid who wants to punch your lights out. What do you guys think? What is the line that you favor there for that fight there? You have a welterweight matchup between a couple of vets long in the tooth. You have the Maverick Michael Chiesa taking on friend of the program in Max Payne Griffin. Again, getting a fight between these couple of guys that have the amount of experience and the resumes that they do on an early prelim card, it's pretty wild. And I think that all the way around this card, top to bottom, and maybe it's just that I'm such a fan or I'm so enamored with the sport that I think that all the way from early prelims through the main event of the main card, you have matchups that you can sink your teeth into. For forever, Clay Guida has been around. I mean, even just this last weekend, back home for Thanksgiving, my uncle, who is not a very big mixed martial arts fan or anything, but he still always recalls way back in the day a fight where I believe it was the infamous Clay Guida and Roger Huerta fight that he had put on, and it was it was just something that stood out so much that one of the few names that he will still draw on and have callbacks to this day is Clay Guida. You have Clay Guida as the second fight on this card, taking on Chase Hooper. Chase Hooper being a guy who entered the UFC as one of the youngest ever at the time, gets in, had some ups and downs and learned on the job, but which is to certainly be expected when you get in so early and you still are very green. I mean, tree branch level green. But now since moving up to 55, Chase Hooper's had a lot more success and he's a lot more effective now that he's kind of grown into his body, if you will. I do think that it's always going to be something that's worth monitoring over the course of his career, how the damage effect or the cumulative damage, if you will, takes its toll on Chase just because he took so much early on. But this is a kid who has had experience with very high caliber opponents from his early 20s on. And as long as he can maintain and stay healthy, Chase Hooper is going to be a guy who you have to start looking at with a serious nod of respect at 155 pounds. And then opening up the card, you have Kennedy and Nchekwu taking on Lukai Brecki. This is a matchup between a couple of big guys who want to come in, throw thunder, and get out of there as soon as possible. What do you guys think, though, of the card overall this week? And I think that, as mentioned, this is a lot of matchups that you can sink your teeth into from beginning to end. There are fights with fan favorites. There are fights with rising prospects. There are former champions, former title challengers, and everything in between on this card. Ultimate Fighter champions, Contender Series vets. Yes, again, so many that you can sink your teeth into for this weekend to check out. Let us know online what you think of the card. That is me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery or at Mile High Sports. Now, we're going to talk All right, let's talk this weekend's 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series card that's going to close out the year for Colorado's only all Muay Thai exclusive promotion that is going to be going down at the Stampede off Havana Street. You can come check the action out at 2430 South Havana Street in Aurora, Colorado. That is, again, that's going to be doors kicking off at noon, fights starting roughly around 1. Little Muay Thai matinee action, get you out of there to be able to go check out the UFC card. This is going to be a lot of action that will showcase fighters from the local camps, and I think that the fans are once again going to be in store for an afternoon of entertainment. These 5280 shows are tremendous. They pack the house over there at the Stampede, and it's always just such a great atmosphere. In the bout sheet and rounding off, we're just going to name off a few of these fights here. We have an electrifying fight between Joshua Lucero out of Easton Muay Thai taking on Zakai Strong. You have Chris Uboy taking on Emmanuel Ninakori. You have Kanishka Sakahidza taking on Jaden Etienne. Alejandro Rodriguez taking on TJ Click. TJ Click, some of the best tattoos out there in the Muay Thai game out here in Colorado. I mean, it's not just tattoos. What TJ has is art. So check that out. You have a couple of ladies getting after it with Kelly Baker from Genesis taking on Taylor Barrow of Muay Thai, Colorado. You have Rory Hanlos of 3D Martial Arts taking on Omar Habibi of Factory X. Couple of debutantes there. You have Gabriel Naya taking on Elias Trevino of Bang Muay Thai. You have Lorenzo Lolo Grigio of Factory X taking on Ricardo Guimon from McMahon Training Center out of Fort Collins, Colorado. You have O'Shea Wilson taking on Biran Hune. Heavy Hands, Heavy Hearts Training Center against Tankhead Muay Thai. Couple of long-standing camps here in the Denver area. We have a super heavyweight bout between David Akoki taking on Israel Rubio. Vince Vu taking on Liam Kinney. Kinney representing McMahon Training Center. Vu out of Easton Muay Thai. Representing PKT Muay Thai, you have Gabe Echeverry taking on Douglas Martinez of Team Elevation. There's a 172-pound super middleweight bout between Sergio Guzman taking on Eric Goodall. There is a 132-pound lightweight bout. This is a young kid who I'm really excited to see back in action. Someone who always brings the fight and has just a killer attitude in the process. The young man, Killian Tollard, representing Apex Combat Center. You have him taking on Tyree Wolfork of A-Bank, Colorado. Again, a fight that I am super excited to be able to check out this weekend here Saturday. And then rounding off the sheet here, we have a lady scrap at 117 pounds between Sam Kinsey out of Black Sheep taking on Kira Martinez of High Altitude Martial Arts. Come and check the action out this weekend at the Stampede. Again, we're going to be cracking the doors around noon. First fight's kicking off around 1 o'clock. It's going to be a Muay Thai matinee filled with action that you do not want to miss. Stop by, say hi, let us know what you think. Reach out to me on social media. If you have any questions for the card, I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. That's me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. After the switch here, we're going to be checking out 3 rounds to close out the hour.
So many bills. Like, I can't even afford charcuterie.
No summer vacation. That's a thing. The worst? Talking on the phone with my voice like an animal.
Adulting is hard. Hooters is easy. All the games, all the wings, all the beers, all season. No worries. Hooters.
We're going to go 3 rounds to close out the hour here. First round. Former champions Chris Weidman and Aljamain Sterling are on the prelims this weekend at UFC 310. Former UFC great Matt Brown says it feels like it's a demotion. Do you agree? I do agree that it's some, dare I say, disrespectful card placement on the early prelims for somebody like Chris Weidman. Although I will also offer that this card is so loaded that you go and ask, well, who do you take off the main card? Do you take away Thug and Crone and put them on the prelims? I don't know. Do you take away a potential banger at every turn whenever you have a Nate Landwehr fight? Hard to argue that. So I do believe that, yes, it's not ideal placement if you're looking for the prestige or the respect factor for Chris Weidman or for Aljo, who fights Mafsar on the prelims. But again, when you look at styles, Aljo and Mafsar is not 2 guys who you put on the bout sheet who you say, oh, that is going to be fireworks. As opposed to when you say, oh, Nate Landwehr and Duo Choi, well, different story here. So I understand. I don't necessarily agree comprehensively, if you will. Second round. In an interview with Helen Yee, Jason Mayhem Miller extended a helping hand to his former foe, Nick Diaz, amidst his ongoing struggles. Any thoughts? I actually thought that this was kind of heartwarming to see that Mayhem was willing to, at least publicly or through this interview, extend a hand or an olive branch to Nick Diaz. What Nick is going through right now, it's not good. By all accounts around the source, he's battling some demons that are very unfortunate, that are preventing him from being able to completely make a return. And yeah, there's a lot of questions I believe that a lot of people have out there, and we just don't have answers to those things. And I think that it's going to be more time before we learn more about all of the details in there, I guess, as much as we would ever have publicly available for all of the struggles that Nick is going through right now. Obviously, the video that went viral a couple of weeks ago from him some months back, that doesn't look good. And yeah, I just, from a fan's perspective, not even looking at it from being in the business, from that, kid 20 plus years ago who watched Nick Diaz fight for the first time, who got attached to that guy, and that has been my favorite all-time fighter. I want him to get better. I don't care if he ever fights again. I don't care if that's ever the case. I just want for his longevity, I want him to be here in the long run. And by the track that he's on right now, there's a lot of bad things that come with the potential things that he's allegedly involved with right now. I hope that he gets the help that he needs, and I hope that he can get clean. Moving along from that point, we have our final round of the day. We have Glory Kickboxing champion Rico Verhoeven admits that seeing Alex Poatan Pereira's UFC success raised thoughts of an MMA move. At 35, does the heavyweight king of kickboxing have an MMA run in him? At 35, it's tough. At heavyweight, naturally, you have the opportunity to kind of extend your shelf life a little bit, but you also have to take a look into account the amount of wars and just the time in the gym and all of the damage accumulated through the years for somebody like Rico. Could he go out there and have some sort of capture lightning in a bottle run the way that Pereira has had? Certainly. But he could also go the route of Gokhan Saki and get lit up and never seen again. It's a different game going from big gloves to small gloves and adding some of the other elements into the game. You know, I would like to think that he would have some success, but how measured or how high that success would be in terms of accolades, merits, and accomplishments, hard to say, because nobody has ever been able to do what Poatan has done in the time that he has done it. I understand where he's coming from, but I think that it's smart that he's pumped the brakes and decided not to go forge into those waters and stay where he's at, continue to make that glory money, be the face of the promotion, be the just the fixture on their broadcast, anything media related. He is Glory Kickboxing. So why jeopardize the bag? Continue to rake that in and secure it for the long term. What do you guys think, though? Let us know on social media. We wrap this all up for the week just to say thank you all for supporting us each and every week, each and every show in our combat sports community, whether it is here on the MMA plug, out there amidst the local promotions, the events that happen. We are so grateful for your support, and we cannot do what we do without you. So everything that you do, likes, shares, ticket purchases, stream purchases, so on and so forth, is greatly helpful for us. And we look to continue to bring the best for you each and every week, each and every show. I'm Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We will see you next week, same time, same place. This is the MMA plug on Mile High Sports.